Well, good morning. My name is Dr. Scott Lancaster, and I am a research and instruction librarian here at Waters Library. I've been here for a little over 20 years, and the library has changed a lot since I've been here. The research process has changed. The writing, is stayed more or less the same. So I will be referring to things with literature reviews that have really been sort of a standard for a while. What changes is what people are researching over time. And what we were going to specifically focus on today were literature reviews for STEM projects, but it's really can be applied to anything. And I'm not going to really go over a lot about search strategies because I assume you either know how to do that, or if you don't, you can ask that at another time, because I just want to focus on what a literature review is and a little bit on how to find things for the literature review. I have done several literature reviews. I have a doctorate, but it's not in science related things, but I've helped a lot of people with science projects. And I'm going to share my screen now with you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you useful tips and strategies to get started with a literature review, whether it's for a class assignment or for a dissertation or thesis or for an article that you might be hoping to publish. And we're going to look at the purposes of a literature review, selecting resources and evaluating those sources. So to start out with, what is a literature review? A literature review is a synthesis, not a summary, of previous work in a specific area. It should bring together different aspects of the literature in that area and create something new with it. The objective of the literature review is to provide the reader with the knowledge needed to understand your research project. It is not an explanation of everything you know about a particular subject. To begin with, you need to understand the purpose of your literature review, what it is that you're trying to accomplish. If it is a term paper or an assignment for a class, then you need to interpret the requirements of the assignment, including the length, the due dates, the number and type of sources that you're expected to gather and put in that, and then the style for formatting, whether it is APA, MLA, ACS, Chicago, and the library can help you with finding those styles. If you're working on a chapter for your dissertation or thesis, then it's a really good idea to read the literature reviews of 2 to 3 dissertations or theses, and you can find those in the ProQuest dissertation and thesis database. You can search and find ones that have been directed by your advisor. I always recommend people to do that because it's really your advisor is your primary audience when you're writing a thesis or dissertation, and you need to know what has successfully been accepted by that advisor. You can also search for dissertations or theses that were directed by committee members in your for your dissertation or thesis, or within your department, or even more broadly, just the ones that have been recently done in your topic or your discipline. I like to look at Cooper's taxonomy of literature reviews because a lot of people, they don't know really, what they're supposed to put in a literature review, what it is. And Harris Cooper came up with this taxonomy in 1988, and he had 6 different criteria or ways that he was classifying a literature review. The first and probably the most important one is the focus, whether you're looking at and focusing on research findings or research methods or the theories used, the practices or programs that are covered, or interventions that might be utilized. There could be other types of focuses, but that's where you're gathering literature that has a common focus in it. The next one is the goals. What is it you are trying to do with a literature review? You could be critically analyzing the material, or you could be looking to integrate diverse perspectives that different ways of looking at things, or you could be identifying problems or gaps in the literature. And you can also look at the perspective that you're taking when you are writing your literature review. It's basically going to be either neutral, or you're going to take some type of position for or against the what's covered in your literature review. Your coverage can either be exhaustive, which is going to be hard to do, but if you have a really narrow focus, you can come close to being exhaustive. It's going to be representative, where you don't try to get everything, you just try to get kind of a random sample. Or it's going to be pivotal, which means you're going to select the literature that has had the biggest impact. And many of the databases will indicate to you how many times an article has been cited, or the ProQuest databases do that. So it's going to be easy to find the pivotal articles that way. Otherwise, you will just know who or you may know who are the primary authors in whatever your field is. When I wrote my dissertation, there were about 4 writers that were real. I knew that they, were really the key people in what my topic was. So I really focused on things from them. The next is organization. And this is the one where once you've gathered all your sources and you're trying to figure out how am I going to organize this. And really this is you go through this process whenever you are writing any kind of paper. You either have have the literature review organized conceptually, which is going to be by subtopics within it, or it will depend on the area that you're researching, or it could be historically, or in other words, chronologically. You can go either from the most recent to the earliest, or from the earliest to the most recent, and then you're sort of looking at the development of ideas over time. Or it could be methodologically, where you are looking at, you're dividing it up by the different methodologies that the various sources used that you're looking at. And then lastly, there's your audience. Primarily, it's going to be your instructor or your thesis or dissertation advisor in the setting you're in. But more broadly, you can look at it 3 different categories. It's either towards scholars, which may be general scholars, or it could be scholars within the discipline that you're writing in, or it could be practitioners or policymakers, people who have some type of influence over the topic that you're writing about. And finally, it could be the general public. So I think I like to categorize things. And so looking at Cooper's taxonomy helps me to understand what a literature review is. Through the process of creating a literature review, you should refine the scope of your research. You're developing that as you go along. You need to rationalize the significance of the research problem. Whatever it is, you've created a research topic, a problem, a question, and your literature review will rationalize why that's important. Third, distinguish what has been done from what needs to be done, because you're creating something new with when you put together your ideas. And so you need to first figure out what's been done and then project from that what needs to be done. You need to discover important, relevant variables. You really, it's like a scavenger hunt, kind of. You start out perhaps knowing not as much about your topic, but as you research it, you discover what are the variables, and often you do that just even in the searches before you've even read any of the articles. And then you need to relate ideas and theories to applications, and that's what you do in the process of your education here. You've learned about ideas, but now you're sort of moving into how to connect those ideas to something you're doing and you're creating. You need to also think about avoiding fruitless approaches as you further and further move in to the research process. You figure out what works and what doesn't work, and you make your the research process for you a lot more fruitful. And then finally, place your research in a historical context, because as you learn more and more about the field that you're researching, you will see how, especially if you do research going back a long time, you will see how the scholars in a particular field cycle through ideas and focuses. And my dissertation is in English literature, and especially kind of the time period of Shakespeare. And and when I was an undergraduate, I didn't really see this, but as I moved through my research in the graduate programs I did, I saw how scholars, changed what they were really focusing on, and what people are writing about and researching as far as the Shakespeare era studies is a lot different from what they were looking at 20 or 30 years ago. So you will learn how your research interests and your idea fit into the historical context, or what is the scholarly conversation or the scholarly communication going on. And this isn't always true, but I think that typically you write two versions of your literature review during the research process. And perhaps that's only within your notes, but the first one is a comprehensive review of the literature with the objective of teaching yourself what is known about your interest area. The goal is to broadly learn what has been done and what needs to be done. Your research questions emerge from this first stage. This is really exploratory. It will depend on how much you already know about your topic, but it's sort of like casting a big net as you are maybe looking even in encyclopedias or things that you're not going to use in your final as final sources, but you just are trying to educate yourself about the topic, and it narrows down more and more. And that may not be something you formally write. It could be just something in your head or something in your notes. But the second is a more focused review of the literature with the objective to inform the reader about what is known and unknown in your research area, drawn from a narrower set of literature based on the research questions developed. So you might have come up with many articles in that first step, but you narrow it down to just the few that are relevant and focus on your project for the second step. How long should a literature review be? And this is really referring to a thesis or dissertation. It would just need to be sort of cut down appropriately if it's a research paper for a class. Um, Writing and deciding the scope of the literature review is complicated. Students may ask how many articles they should cite, how many pages they should write. That depends. You may be told if it's an assignment for a class, you've got to have 10, 20, whatever. But a general guideline for a thesis or dissertation is that 5 to 10 articles is probably not enough, but more than 200, probably too many. And it's just going to be subjective, dependent on your topic, how many between 10 and 200 you have. Likewise, 1 to 2 pages is not enough, but more than 50, probably too many. We'll look at an example literature review before we finish, and you can see what I think was appropriate. As you prepare to write the literature review, a useful first step is to identify relevant keywords to help navigate through your existing literature. When researching for information, remember to give preference to primary research. Using these keywords, perform an initial search of the literature using one of the citation databases. Create an initial bibliography of 10 to 20 articles, and then a broader bibliography of 50 to 80 articles. And again, that's for thesis or dissertation. Cut it down for if you're doing a research paper. And the coming up with keywords is really the fundamental thing that are one of them that we teach when we're showing people how to do research in the databases. I'm not really going to cover that here, but you need to be ready to shift from one word or one term to another. For instance, a few years ago, I was researching the effect of global warming on cattle farming was what I was interested in looking at. And I used Agricola, which is our main agriculture database. And I put in the term cattle in my initial search and global warming. And I sort of knew that there were other ways of terming global warming, like climate change or greenhouse effect. But as I looked then through my sources my results that I got, and I did get many with using the term cattle, I began to see that the database was their main term that they were using for what I was thinking of as cattle was livestock. So I went back and added livestock in my search and came up with a lot more targeted results. So as you look in the databases, you will discover terms that maybe you didn't initially think of, and you need to be ready to use those terms. I found this diagram, which I thought was a really good illustration of the process of writing a literature review, including the researching of it. You first have to select or refine a topic, whether it's broad or really focused. You have to begin with something as you're going to the databases and other sources of information that you have. Then you begin that process of searching, either in databases or in books or other printed material that you have. As you're looking at the results that you get, you evaluate that literature to decide how relevant it is. And I usually pick a lot of things to sort of look at the abstracts or the titles, or maybe just look through the beginning and the ending of the articles. And then I sort of narrow it down from that. And as you're evaluating the literature, you want to take notes and also manage your references, which means you save them in some format. Now, everything mostly is saved digitally, and all of the databases will allow you to save articles, save search results in those databases. You can create subfolders, and so otherwise you might print it out and save it like that. And as you are moving toward the end of preparing your first draft and then revising that draft, you also need to, especially depending on how long your process is, it took me 10 years to write my dissertation, keep current. So you always need to be going back and seeing, is there something new that's been written? And you're sort of, as you're going back on some of these things with keeping current, you're going back to other searches as you evaluate literature and find, you might find, oh, there's nothing here. I need to go back and tweak my topic, or maybe my topic is too broad. I need to focus it down, and then I'm going to go through another search. So this is basic process of putting together a literature review. This is a sample literature review of a dissertation that I was one of the committee members for a few years ago. Elaine Valley, she was doing a study of libraries, middle school libraries, and looking at what LGBT things they had in their library. And her literature review had 4 stages. And let me show you. This is there's 20 pages from the dissertation. I wanted to show you. This is what I would suggest if you are looking, if you're looking at dissertations or theses that were maybe done by your advisor. You can find those in the ProQuest dissertation database. And I like to make notes on them. In fact, when I wrote my dissertation, I went through some other people's that were not about the same topic I was doing, but I just outlined the process of what they were doing, the logical steps that they were going through. And I then tried to copy that same pattern. And so when I went through Elaine's here, this is from a page where there's the problem, what she's trying to do. She's looking at the availability of LGBT items in school libraries, and she's doing both a quantitative and a qualitative study. She's the qualitative, she's interviewing several school librarians. The quantitative was this process of her she had a list of books that were provided to her by some source, and she just went through the catalog of several libraries to see which books they had and which books they didn't have. So this is chapter 2 is typically where the literature review is in a thesis or dissertation. And I was looking at just the process of what she was doing. And she has, the first part is an introduction where she takes a broad look at the problem. You've got to define what it is that you're doing. And then she went through sort of the history of the problem. And then she moved to the theoretical framework where she describes in just a page or two what methodologies she's going to use in explaining her what she understands from her data. And then she moved into the actual review of the literature. And that starts here. And she's categorized it in 4 different ways. She's looked at needs and perceptions, perceptions of the public librarians, public library access and holdings, and finally, the perceptions of school librarians about LGBTQ school library service. Um, and then in her summary, she has uh, she explains briefly, what she finds from this review of literature. So I suggest that one way that you might, it might benefit you to get some examples of a literature review in whatever you're writing, and not only read it, but sort of try to understand the logic of what it's building. It doesn't have to even be about the same exact topic as you, but if you just look at, what works in it, I think that's important to do. The types of sources that you're going to be finding, remember that primary sources are going to be the ones that are going to be the most important. These are immediate firsthand accounts of a topic, such as documents in history, a text in literary studies, survey data in social sciences, or reports of original research in natural sciences. So this is where in either the survey data or the reports of original research, those are going to be being reported and written about by the people who actually collected that data or conducted that research. The second one is secondary sources. These would be books, articles, or reports that are based on primary sources. So they didn't do the actual collection of the data or the original research or the original research, but they are looking at what other people did. And sometimes you'll find articles that are actually just literature reviews of some articles that are published about a particular topic. And these are going to be important. These would be things that you might use in your literature review, especially if you're looking at the attitudes toward something, because you're not necessarily going to be looking at, or what you're going to want to focus on is what the writer of that secondary source says about the sources that he or she have collected. And so you're going to look for that to know what is important to use. And the last one are the tertiary sources, which are synthesis of secondary sources for the general reader. This could be textbooks, encyclopedias, mass market publications. Usually you're not going to use these in your literature review, and you're not going to use them in your final thesis, dissertation, or paper, but they are very important in the research process because it gives you the background information that you need. So again, primary or secondary sources should be relied on if you're making a scholarly argument, because they make up the conversation in which you're seeking to participate. I don't know if y'all heard of the Burkean parlor. We used that when I was teaching freshman English for a couple of years here, but it's you need to look at your research topic as having been part of a scholarly conversation that is going on, because somebody will publish an article saying something, and then people read that, and then some of those people write articles that are in response to that person's article, or maybe they conducted their own research or gathered their own data that was, and then they're publishing something that tells their point of view, and it goes back and forth just like a conversation. So those are the things that you want to focus on. The tertiary sources, again, can help you get a feel for a topic. They may be written by distinguished scholars, but they're limited in scope because they're intended for a broad audience who may be unfamiliar with the topics that they address. they tend to oversimplify the research. Remember that the research process is not linear. In the past, researchers often browse the shelves to find similar books. Finding an article can lead forward or backward to the articles it cites or the ones that cite it. You will also find subject terms related to articles you find that will be useful in future searches. Anytime you find an article that is really highly relevant to your topic, I always tell people, like, look at the articles that it cites. If you can figure out who cited it, look at that, because then you're going backwards and you're going forward in the scholarly conversation. And also look at the subject terms that have been assigned to that article, and you use those to go back and do other searches for similar articles, or to narrow the scope of your result list if you've got a result list that's too big to look at everything in it. Exploring the online databases. Along with books, online databases are a valuable asset of the library. Like journals, databases are subscription items, and each library's subscriptions will differ based on local need and resources. Some databases are general, while others are specific. You should become familiar with the major databases in your field to which the library subscribes, and you should learn how to use them. And the librarians are here to help you to do that. At the end, I'll show you how you can contact us. This is an example. This is about as much as I want to get into the actual searching, but just to show you how you can narrow down results. And this is looking at the idea of, like, what happens to your social media things after somebody passes away. That's what this person's research interest was. So in one search, which is our federated search on the library homepage, put in social media and death, you get almost 2 million articles. And then you tweak it by putting social media in quotation marks, which is phrase search. Then it's looking for not just social in one place and media in another, but that exact term. Then you narrow it down to under 200,000. So you can see that's a very significant focus. You've cut that down quite a bit. Further, if you narrow it down to only articles that are published, including and after 2012, you narrow it down a little bit more. And then you broaden it when you, instead of using social media, you use all of the different types of social media that are the main types. And further narrow that down to 2016. So these are sort of two separate searches where you see how you can go from a big result to a more focused result. And if you're using digital afterlife is an example of a term that describes a scholarly research topic, and those topics may change over the years, but and often, like, I wouldn't have thought of digital afterlife because it's not a term that's used in popular media. And the only place I would have really come across this is because I'm not a research, I don't have a research interest in this. I only know the popular terms like social media and death. But again, like, I picked up the term livestock in Agricola. Once you start doing these searches, you see, oh, there's this term digital afterlife, and it's and so you want to sort of pull out those specific terms And you see, when you start using that, you get really focused. And now we've got only 94 articles. And at that point, I would look through all of the titles. I wouldn't read all the articles, but that would be a small enough list that I could at least glance over the titles. And the librarians here, we can help you to figure out how to do these searches if you don't know. You can also use the internet for academic research. You can use it to get your bearings with respect to a new topic, but regard everything you learn as provisional, because understand that even though the searching is pretty much the same, whether you're looking in the library database or in Google or some other search engine, understand that the things you're finding in the library databases, even if they're online sources, are going to be things that are curated, that have been identified as valuable or authentic, relevant, true, if you will. Whereas something you find on the internet, you've got to figure that out for yourself. And I mean, there's a lot of examples of things that are intentionally misleading, or that aren't, that are either just not true, or that have a bias behind them, that while it doesn't make it not true, you need to understand what that bias is in order to interpret what it's saying, certainly in regards to what research you're doing. And they don't always, make that bias evident. So regard everything you find on the internet as provisional. It can also be used to help explore potential keywords. When I was searching that global warming and cattle farming, I actually went to Wikipedia to look up, and I looked up global warming just to make sure if there were any terms like climate change or whatever that I wasn't thinking of, because I just wanted to make sure I knew as much as I could about different ways of terming that idea. It can also be a way to remind yourself of dates or facts, but check those against more reliable sources. So if you are researching some historical event and you can't remember exactly when it was that it happened, you might look it up in Wikipedia or something, but I wouldn't cite that on anything. But it could point to a source that you could cite. It also could help you locate the authors of sources you might want to contact, because I've used it to find out, like I might know who wrote a dissertation and I want to know where are they now. And if they're faculty at some university, I might, I can find them through a Google search. And then a lot of people are putting their resumes online. So if it's a writer and I want to know what else they've written, I might also look for their resume online or their vita. Google Scholar is a really good source to use. And I've found things in that actually are not indexed in the databases. I've actually found things in Google Books that, so if you need any help in searching with any of these internet sources, the librarians are here to help you. Avoid common mistakes, which among them might be not employing the best keywords and identifying the best sources, not relating your study's findings to the findings of the literature review, relying on secondary rather than primary sources, or tertiary rather than secondary sources, or blindly accepting other researchers' findings rather than critically examining them. When I was in graduate school, one of my assignments I was given was take an article and look at 3 of the things that are cited and find out if they were cited properly. And I picked three and found a lot of problems with them. And I ended up looking at everything that had been cited in that article. And I found things where I didn't really think, even with something like a statistic, where it was just a number that he pulled out of some almanac that are some data resource. I didn't really feel like he characterized that figure in the right way. So don't take everything just, at face value. I mean, question everything, not just what you find on the internet, but you to some degree can even question things that are found in peer-reviewed articles that you're looking at. And the more you know about the field, the more you will be able to critically question that. Other resources, and I'll show you on the library homepage, we've got research guides. We've got almost, I think, 269 databases. We've got 2 library research tutorials. You'll find those in D2L. There's a beginning research and an advanced research. Ask a librarian is how the best way you can contact one of us. I understand that the Writing Center has just opened back up and they're all online now. So if you need help with improving your paper after you've written it, they'll be able to help you. Authenticate is something that's used with graduate students. It's sort of like, among other things, it looks for plagiarism issues, and theses and dissertations are put through that. And if your advisor can help you, or I'm also one of the ones that can put drafts of theses or dissertation through Authenticate. And the last thing, Grammarly, something that I used when I was teaching freshman English and had a lot of students who English wasn't their first language. And I found that was something, it's more sophisticated than the type of corrections that you will get suggested by Word. It will look at whether a sentence is passive voice, and it'll look at subject verb agreement. So it'll look at articles and prepositions and whether they're used properly. So I just take a look at Grammarly if you have a problem with the writing. I want to look now. I'm going to stop sharing and then go to the library homepage. So this is the library homepage. Just to point out a few of the main features. This is what I called one search. This is a federated search that will look in all of the library databases as well as the catalog, which are going to be our books and other type things that we have specifically in this library, many of which are electronic, because for the past 10 years or more, our preference for getting new books has been to get digital books. So you can use this to search in almost everything we've got. Ask a Librarian is how you contact one of us. If you click on that, you can fill out this information, and it goes to, there's like 5 or 6 of us that monitor this. And if you don't care, you just want somebody to answer, you don't care which particular librarian does, this is the best way. It's usually not monitored after 5 o'clock. So if you put a question in after 5, somebody at 8 o'clock in the next morning will answer that question. We're also have a chat widget that would show up but actually I'm the one that's supposed to be doing chat now, and I had to sign out of it. But if I was signed in, there would be a little widget here that said chat with us. And in that case, you would be talking with somebody or chatting, texting with somebody in real time. The research guides are things that we put together that help to, we've got, I think, around 30 so far, 40. So you notice there's one for agricultural sciences and natural resources, citing with APA or MLA, and there's one down here for Chicago. I've got one, Literature Review 101, that you can, look through that if you like, and probably I'll put a link to this recording in here as well. So just remember the research guides. And the databases for and you can put by subject, and you'll see, what specific subject related databases that we have, although some of them are like Academic Search Ultimate is all areas, but Agricola is just agriculture. And I wanted to point out a new thing. We just got ACS, Guide to Scholarly Communication. So this American Chemical Society. So if anyone is doing a paper or a writing project that is supposed to use ACS, this is really good. And then we did just get the MLA online too. So we've got the MLA handbook online, and yeah, instead of the print MLA, now they've put it digital, and hopefully we'll get APA as soon as it's available as well. You'll see future workshops that are going to be advertised here. And then finally, if there's any one of us specifically you want to contact, you can click on our name and it will show you the email address and the phone number. I'm gonna now stop the recording, and if anyone has any questions,